Did you know that 86% of employees across North America are simply not engaged when they go to work? As a leader, would you like to learn how to turn that around? Well, then stick around for today's episode on the Meeting Leadership Podcast, because we've got branding expert James Morrissey, and he's going to bring all of the things that you can do for internal and external communications to light so that you can actually transform your company culture.
Are you a professional who wants to become a more effective leader? Then get ready for practical tips from the coach with the experience and inspiration to help you succeed in any leadership situation. You're listening to the Meeting Leadership Podcast with Gordon Shepherd.
Welcome to another episode of the Meeting Leadership Podcast. My name is Gordon Shepherd, and I just want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for agreeing with the basic philosophy of this show, and that's this. In order to be a great leader, you have to know how to run a great meeting. And in order to run a great meeting, you have to know how to be a great leader. And that's why on the podcast here, we bring on outstanding guests to help you learn about your leadership at a different level in terms of all the areas that they bring in their expertise from. We bring in sort of the practical tips that you need to be a better facilitator, create better agendas. And in the archives here, it's a powerful resource that you can go back and draw from day in and day out to not only improve your meetings, but you know when you do that and you connect them to your strategy, that will actually help to build your entire organization and lead through to actually helping you to serve your customers and your community at the highest possible level. It is great to have you here. And I'm also proud to say that this episode of the Meeting Leadership Podcast is brought to you by the Meeting Leadership Academy. Now, if you and your team are struggling with meetings and you know they could be better, and you know if you invested in making them better, it'll really have an impact not only on yourself, but on your entire team, well, then check out the Meeting Leadership Academy by going to meetingleadershipinc.com/academy. And now I am really excited to introduce today's show. It's called How Inspired Branding Can Grow Your Organization. And we've got guest expert James Morrissey on the show. And when it comes to real transformational branding, James has earned his stripes. He's got over 25 years of experience. He's led large institutional changes in terms of branding. He's also led the Met Agency, where he's the principal. He's been doing that for over 15 years. And way more important than the things that I'm listing from his bio is the fact that James has a groundbreaking attitude. He's not leaving any stone unturned when it comes to helping his clients go as far as they can. I mean, this interview goes way beyond a leader going in to work with the Med Agency and saying, we need a logo, because James wants to make sure that he pushes the edge. He takes people to a place where they have to consider all aspects really thoroughly, whether that comes to internal communication and external communication. And when the whole package goes together, I think that is the most responsible way to help any organization to thrive. And the final thing I'll have to mention about James, and why you definitely know this is going to be a great interview, is that he's from Montreal, just like me. And with that in mind, I'm not going to hold you back any longer. Here's the insightful interview with James Morrissey. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's really great to have you here, because I know in the time that I've spent with you, what strikes me is the high integrity that you bring to the sort of overall kind of branding and help that you bring to your clients and to the world. And there's something I picked out of the mission statement on the Met Agency website, and it's this one. There it says, our mission is to help you achieve your mission. And having again spent time with you, I know that's exactly what you do with clients of all sizes. So I really appreciate that you've taken the time to be here. There's going to be a lot of people, though, listening to the show that don't know you. So if you had to introduce yourself, how would you do that?
That's a really good question. It's one of the toughest questions that people have. Describe yourself. So about 15 years ago, I started up my company, the Met Agency. And before that, I was the marketing director of McEwen, and I had worked there for 10 years and kind of led the rebrand there. Started up my own business and thought, for what I've learned from post-secondary and from rebranding, there are a lot of different organizations that I could help, not only in post-secondary, but beyond. So yeah, we've been kind of doing kind of soup to nuts when it comes to the kind of clients that we work with. Very much an Alberta thing, where you work with oil and gas and you work in retail and you work with professional associations. It's a variety of different organizations. But you're right about the integrity part. I think that's the thing that kind of gets me up in the morning.
Well, and I would say integrity and high quality. And I know at the end of the show here, we're going to talk about guiding people to your website. I think I would, not knowing a ton about your area, but I would put that work up against anywhere. I mean, this is not an Alberta only story in terms of the acumen that you're bringing to it. And so the fact that you lead your own business, the fact that you're bringing, again, this high integrity to all levels of the work that you're doing with your clients is a great opportunity to help the leaders who listen to this podcast get a chance to learn from you. And I know that you're super passionate about company culture. So when we say that to you, what does that mean for you?
That's, if you go online and you look up a company culture or organizational culture, you're going to see millions and millions of articles about it. And I think the defining part about it is that what the heck is it? And how do we interpret it? And how healthy is our organization? So is a company culture like the glue or the DNA, the spirit, the morale? And I think it's kind of a bit of all of those sort of things. But I've spent an awful lot of time kind of looking at where the world is at right now when it comes to culture. And I think the thing that kind of really kind of scares me on some level is just how organizations are not very healthy.
I completely agree. Years ago, before my sort of second career, in a sense, working as a consultant and doing the work that I do now, I worked in the television business at a time when it was in sort of slow decline. And I can tell you, being an employee in a business that was in the decline, the morale was brutal. So I've lived in those places where the office desks used to be full and then suddenly half of them are gone and two-thirds of them are gone. And you're sort of coasting through life in a sense. Like there's a lot of folks running around going, when are you going to get your package? It was that kind of thing. But I know there were some stats that you'd come across also in this area.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. 86% of North Americans have checked out of their jobs. And when you look at that number, like, how does that trickle down to the brand? And if the people that you work with on a day-to-day basis don't care about the company, then how well is that company going to do? 80% of employees from a PwC research project said 80% of employees said their workplace culture needs to change. Like 80%.
Wow. And then they come to you, the leader comes to you.
Right.
Now, they haven't sort of taken the time to do the internal litmus test, because this is essentially most people. From a leadership point of view, you have to know then that there are a bunch of people in your organization. So they're going to go and say, what I need more customers. I'm going to come and meet James. He's going to do this big branding thing, external branding thing. But branding goes way beyond reading a billboard.
Oh, for sure. And I've been listening to a lot of your podcasts and I found them very interesting. There was one about branding that I thought was quite intriguing to me. And really, going back to school and getting one of my accreditations is in advertising. And in the advertising class, they said branding is essentially managing communication at every touch point. That's what it is. So as much as people will say, well, what's your why? That's what advertising or branding is. It's a mixture of every interaction with your organization, right? So how people write emails, how people dress at work, how people answer their phone, the customer service side, the product knowledge side. And it's tough for an organization to be able to ensure that they look after all of those things, right? When we look at the 4 parts of a brand, and this is kind of one of those classic moments in the advertising side, the 4 parts of a brand are the history, the difference, what is your unique part, your personality, what makes you really stand out, and what are you willing to fight for? And when you look at those 4 parts and you do focus groups around those 4 parts, you really get to understand the company culture of an organization.
Well, and
I can tell you one of the things that we were talking about the health side. Is it okay if I tell you a little bit of a focus group when it comes to culture?
I was just about to say, please, let's hear an example. That'd be awesome.
Okay. Recently, we did a focus group. So when I went back to the line that I said earlier, 86% of North Americans have checked out of their jobs. We were in a focus group where 100% of the people in the room, 100%. And this is really super scary. Like when you start to get into a room full of people that have just given up. And when you start to drill down about what's making them feel like that, there are all of these different signs, right? Like they don't really understand the mission of the organization. They don't really care about what's really going on. The company doesn't trust them. They don't trust their leaders. Nobody's investing in them. And then you kind of go through this laundry list of things that have really, really caused them a lot of grief. And the interesting thing about this project too was the leader that actually brought us into this focus group and got us this project to work on. ended up shortly after going on stress leave because that's just kind of the environment that they work in. And to make matters worse, the organization's health provider started harassing this person a couple of days after she went on stress leave.
Wow.
And so you kind of look at it and go, wow, this organization just continues to be a difficult organization for people to work there. And you could imagine what it feels like to go to work every day if everybody is completely not only checked out, but they're stressed.
What strikes me about what you're saying is there are so many leaders that get isolated and don't admit that this is going on, right? So at least in that situation, they had the ability to even get a focus group into the situation. So they're trying to do something about it, but so many of them get isolated. And then here we are back. We started out saying this is a branding thing, but really it is a full, like you said, company culture, every touch point opportunity. I really appreciate where you're going with that. I know in the work that I do in starting with saying, how are your meetings going, and hoping that we can then get every meeting that takes place within an organization to be outstanding, and that will actually drive and help them to achieve their objectives. I can hear you're even more thorough than that from all these touch points. What's happening in terms of when you deal with a senior leader then with this kind of good background to go to them and say, here's the first place we're going to start to help you start to turn this employee engagement piece around from a branding perspective?
I think the big thing, Gordon, is I look at these situations and I get very, very excited. I get excited when I see a culture that needs help. And to me, it's like just an opportunity to take the branding to a different level, right? I think there are a lot of really great organizations that could go in and help an organization reinvent themselves or to break down a new visual identity or a new platform to work off of. But I think to me, it's an opportunity when you see that things aren't going well, that you start to kind of break down what's going on and what are the main factors that are involved in building a better culture. You can go off and rebrand and make a new logo, but if your organization hasn't changed, then nothing is going to change.
You mean the new logo isn't going to solve all my problems?
Well, no, not really. And, I guess that's the thing too, right? And the great thing about what I've heard from your podcast is you're really kind of breaking down maybe some of the misconceptions around what people think about, like even just about branding, for instance, right? And there was a really terrific podcast that you had from a woman in Calgary who was
Louisa Campos, outstanding. Yeah.
And just talking about, like, there's a lot of stuff around the Simon Sinek stuff around start with why and why do you exist? And I think some of the things that we talk about to leaders, and when we talk about what are the main factors to maybe here are the 4 main things that are going wrong that I've been able to discern from reading a million websites and meeting with a lot of people. And so the first major issue is, do employees actually understand why we do what we do? Very much the Simon Sinek, like what gets us up in the morning.
Well, and I'll jump into that one and say, when I'm teaching at conferences, in my case about sort of effective meetings and connecting your meetings to your strategy, one of my favorite questions is, and I actually preface this now and say, please don't get upset when I say this, but can anybody in the room, I'm in a room full of 200 people, can anybody state their vision statement? None of the hands go up. I mean, it is stunning. So back to this why issue, they've gone ahead and paid some consultant a bunch of money to put together a bunch of words on paper that nobody read, and they put it on the shelf. So of course they don't know why they're there. I mean, it's just unbelievable. How are you able to help people in that moment?
I think that's the problem, right? I think you're exactly 100% right. And I've come into companies after they've hired consultants to work through a lot of this information. And then they take the report and they put it on the shelf and they go back to work.
Wow.
Right. And so, I mean, that's a big part of it. The second major factor that I've been able to figure out is, are employees engaged? Are they engaged in what's going on? Do they actually know what's going on? Are they important to the process? And then the third factor is, do you actually trust the people that you work with and trust the company? And it's interesting because one of the people that work here basically kind of said that one of the employers that she worked with, they just use threats. And if somebody goes on stress leave, they make sure they get rid of them. And that kind of like, they don't trust the organization. They don't trust the leadership. And so you're basically having a whole group of employees that don't actually trust what they're trying to do. And then the fourth one is like the investment side. And I've heard this so often in the last little while about how companies won't invest in employees because, well, 86% have checked out of their job, so they're probably looking for a different job. So why would I invest in those people if they're just going to go somewhere else?
The dollar side, I know on the investment side, just for training alone is less than $100 a month per person for your Fortune 500 sort of thing on average. It's just a disaster, certainly when you look at it from a North America point of view. And funny enough, when I come to you and see the sign on the door and I came in, I was a leader, I thought I needed a logo. And then you just said, wait a second, we're going to start here. Does the employee understand what you do and why you do it? Are they engaged? Do they trust? Are you investing in those people? What a great place to start to then allow your work from, say, an internal and external point of view to get those communications to rise up to the furthest possible level.
Exactly. There's so many things that people think are really going on in an organization, right? And even from a leadership standpoint, there's a really great research project that I came to read about because I was looking at a colleague of mine's website who talked about the same subject. And it's a PwC research project. And one of the stats, the stats that kind of come from these about the disconnection between leadership feeling like 65% of leaders think that they have a really healthy culture and 30% of employees think they have a healthy culture. One of the numbers that I think is really fascinating to me is 89% of leaders believe employees leave for money.
Oh, wow.
But it's not true. According to the statistics, suggests that 12% leave for money.
Wow.
So if only 12% are leaving for money, what are the rest of those people leaving for? Right? And maybe they're going to find a culture that's better than the culture they're in.
And again, we can hear from this conversation in the work that you do to help people build, I'm going to say, that outward identity piece, right? So again, when folks get a chance to see your website, they're going to see this outstanding work around all the different things that you do. And again, I hope they take the time to go through there thoroughly. The other piece that is, although is fundamental to the outbound or what people see from the outside, is this internal communication. I remember when we talked in the pre-interview about this, that's something I was absolutely fascinated. When we think about bringing branding into helping a leader run a better meeting, how would you help to convey that to them?
Yeah, I think that's really, really, really important. I think it all comes down to you have a room full of people that are there and have stuck with you. And you have to engage them and get them involved. You need to get them involved in conversations. And we do little things here with our staff where we'll have every employee for every staff meeting, one employee will come in, spend 5 minutes talking about a subject that they're interested in that we don't even know that they're interested in. And so we get to know each other on a deeper level and we get to engage with each other and build a relationship where I think it's so vitally important that people feel like they're valued. So that's a main part that we do in our own company. And we also look at that past what we would do from a branding standpoint and say, like, if we found out that your brand archetype is one of the 12 archetypes and we can start to kind of work toward really expressing what that organization is, then we have to live it from the inside out. And I think a lot of organizations kind of miss the boat on it.
Would you say that living from the inside out is less expensive for a leader or more expensive in terms of time and money?
Well, that's the thing, right? If 86% of people have checked out of their jobs and all these people are looking for new opportunities, it's like that's a very expensive thing to keep replacing people.
So the downside is if you don't invest in this trust-based approach, this relationship-based approach, this approach internally where the language that you're developing, even from a branding point of view, is really the language that needs to be not only inward-facing, but it actually, when you do it over and over again, you develop good habits. And I would suggest actually, it's significantly less expensive. But often leaders just don't even know where to start in this area because you said, like you're saying in the stats, they think everything's okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if we talked about this in the pre-interview or not, but social media is a fascinating place and you get to see what young people are thinking about and as even around employment. And so I was on LinkedIn the other day and I saw that somebody was sharing an article about a Calgary advertising agency. And they were like, oh my God, wouldn't it be cool to work here because they have a Scotch bar, right? And it's like a Scotch bar for themselves, right? And they're like, wow, what an innovative idea, right? When I was growing up, one of the family friends of ours was a police officer, and they had a bar at the police station. Wasn't so into me. And then they would, anyway, I digress. But I mean, like, there's a radio station at West Edmonton Mall that's had a bar for like 15 years in their space.
Right.
And so, young people think, oh, we're going to change the way that people do business. Well, it's I don't think a Scotch bar is the panacea of keeping people in their jobs. I think that there's a lot of work that goes into building a really, really strong team. And I think it goes past doing brand sessions and learning about your brand and having a focus. It's an ongoing process of ensuring that those 4 factors are looked after, right? I mean,
well, and help me out with an example from your team. So you're actually practicing this. You're putting this muscle into play in your own company. You were mentioning a specific thing that you're doing in meetings to give people an opportunity. From a leadership, ownership perspective, what's the payoff been for you to be practicing that day in and day out in your own company?
Do you know, it's so fascinating to me to listen to people that work in my industry. And I think the focus of advertising agencies of the past is to take young people in and kind of wring that youthful vitality out of them by running them into the ground to see how tough they are. And if you're walking out of the office at 5 o'clock and everybody else is looking at you with a scowl, it's probably not a healthy work environment. And I think one of the most important things from my side is for people here to feel that they're valued and their time is valuable, that we're not going to run them into the ground, that we're going to take care of them. And they're going to work hard, but we're going to ensure that they're part of a team, that they see the big picture. And I want to tell you a funny little side story. And it's just like a weird company thing here. But I had this experience when I worked at McEwen, where I had this incredible boss. And this boss said, "Hey, we've got this new job for you. I want you to think about it on the weekend and tell me how much money you want to make," which is a really strange thing to have, right? And I said, "Oh, okay." So I thought about it over the weekend. I anguished over it. I came in to see him the next Monday and I sat down on his couch and said, "How about this amount?" And he's like, "Oh my God. Like, do you not understand the $10, $20 rule?" And I said, "No." He's like, "So do you remember when you asked your parents for $10 to go to a movie and they gave you $5? So the next time you ask them for 20 and they gave you 10, which is what you want, and sometimes they'll give you 20. And then you go, oh, I can bring a friend or I can buy popcorn," right? So the spirit of that lives in our company where we go away with some creative ideas. And so we usually go out with 2 different directions to go in. One that I think is already like pushing people and pushing boundaries. And then the other one is really pushing boundaries, ones that we think would really, really work, but are harder to sell to companies. But we know from all of our research that this is the right way to go. So our team kind of goes out and says, we have the $10 idea and we have the $20 idea, right? And sometimes they come back and go, and this is like the language here. Somebody will walk by my office and go, "We got 20, which I think is super exciting because people are pushing hard to get the new, the better, stronger, pushing boundaries solution through. Right. And so we have the $20 line that happens.
Wow, that is just a great story. And I love, you can hear how long it takes to get that kind of language soaked in to the place. So this is a perfect example of what you've been talking about. We took the time. We've shared the stories. We know what sort of our internal sort of symbols and language mean. We got the 20. It can get down to that very specific phrase. This is something that any leader can do with their team. I always hope that sometimes leaders can't change necessarily big organizations, but maybe they can actually do it with their specific team of 10 people at a time and maybe put a bit of a blanket around them to protect them and actually have life be as good as possible, especially in large organizations. Some small businesses, I think, have this ability to do it sort of all the way through. And of course, our most successful ones. I mean, when I think about also on the podcast, we had Dan Cockrell on here. Dan, right. 26 years at Disney, and just talked about how those guys are living it day in and day out, and they're doing it at scale. Like that $20 thing, they're doing that at scale for 50 million visitors a year, 70,000 employees at their theme parks. And he says from that leadership point of view, they cannot get outside of their parameters, because if they do, then that Disney experience breaks down, and that's just not allowable. So I love that you brought this example up, that 20, and it's immediately memorable what you just said as well. How is that then at point of service for your clients translating? Because we're saying, hey, leaders, take on these internal things, get that sorted out, and it's going to actually translate into better client experience. How can you correlate that in your experience?
When you do go to our website and you go to just that information about our company, the first thing you're going to see is in large type, a manifesto of what we believe in. And because the company is called the Met, we called it the Metafesto. And The manifesto kind of tells you about the kind of client that we're looking for. And I think it's kind of important too when it comes to finding the right client that fits into the way that we look at the world. And so I don't know if you've gone through the experience of going through brand archetyping.
No, tell me about it. What do you mean?
So basically there's 12 archetypes of a company, and you basically go through a series of processes to figure out what is your brand archetype. So they could be anything from the creator or the ruler or the caregiver, the jester, the lover, the hero, and every brand kind of has their place, right? And so if you think about some of the jester brands are like Skittles.
Right.
And so all of everything that has to do with that company has something to do with joy and fun and playfulness, right?
Right.
And then you have something like the Sage, and you end up having something like Oprah, or you have CNN. And so each brand kind of has that, and they live by it, right? And so most big brands actually know what their brand archetype is, and they use it in their language. And so in our side, I sent the brand archetype document that I'd be happy to share with your listeners.
That'd be great. Yeah.
I sent the document out to our team, and I said, hey, we're redefining our brand here. We want to make sure that we actually understand who we are. Here's this brand archetype document. Pick the one of the 12 archetypes that you think is us, and send it to me only, and do not talk to each other about it. I just want to have just your own, and give me a few bullets about why you believe what you believe in. And I think that's the exciting part, is that everyone here picked exactly the same brand archetype.
Oh, they did.
And that does not happen. Like, we've done this with the University of Alberta.
Sure.
We've done it with oil and gas companies. We've done it with retail. We've done it with not-for-profits. And usually we're debating between 2 or 3 different archetypes. So anyway, ours came out as the creator, which is kind of, I think, is one of the more, it sounds like, oh, that sounds like what an advertising agency should be. But a creator is actually, it builds something of meaning and value, and you're leaving something behind, right? And so when you write on your manifesto that we're talking about our client, and so our client, it says, your company wants to break through, to stand out, to change minds, to push boundaries, to create something of meaning and value, to explore new ideas, and not the same old, same old. When you start reading that and you're thinking about what agency to pick, if that resonates with you and that fits with who you are, then chances are we're probably a good fit. I think the idea of like the generic advertising agency that's going to do generic work for generic clients is kind of a thing of the past. And I think you really need to kind of stand out and tell people what it is that you do and how you do it. And I think if people are looking for a mold breaker or an adventurist or a curiosity seeker or a visionary or a change agent, then we're probably a good fit for them.
This makes so much sense, again, for the leaders that listen to this show, because, again, they're building their leadership skills. And you can hear, not only do you want to have an internal message for the employees to start to break them away from and get them more engaged in what they're doing, but even when you're going out to seek a vendor. Now, in this case, that could be applied, ironically, to all the different types of vendors that they deal with. Go find the right one. And in this case, you said we're so well defined, the folks that walk in here and fit this are going to fit. And did you mention, tell me if I'm right here, have you fired a client before?
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
And is that because they don't fit with what you've just described?
Yeah. You know, the thing, Gordon, I think in your experience of working, the feeling of excitement about doing what you do and going to bed at night knowing that you've done what you're supposed to do, that you feel really proud of what you do. I think, to me, that is a really, really big part of it. And that comes from interactions with clients. And when a client is telling us what they do and they don't really do it, and we're in a position to help market the thing that they're really not doing, it's a very, very uncomfortable spot. And yeah, we actually fired, and this was like a few years into my agency, and it was 60% of our revenue of our company.
Holy mackerel, that's a big decision. So
but I couldn't deal with it. I couldn't go to bed at night feeling good about it.
Well, so I think this is that thing of like, you're walking the talk, right?
It was a big deal.
Yeah. So that was a major decision in terms of your company, but when you did that, it really was the right thing at the right time. And then from that moment forward, everybody else that's coming in the door is going to be the right fit, and you'll be able to do exponentially better work for them.
Oh, for sure. And when I went and told the team what I had done, our creative director looked at me and said, Thank you. And I think it's because it affects the morale. It affects everything that kind of happens in your company. And truthfully, if you're really just working for money, this is probably not the right industry for you.
Wow.
I mean, you really do need to have the conscience and the belief, right? I mean, if we kind of go back to that employee part, it's like employees have to believe in what you believe in. And I think an agency has to believe in what you believe in too. And if we don't believe that you're doing what you believe in, then it's really, really hard in good conscience to be able to do the work, right? And feel good about it.
This makes total sense in terms of bringing a world back into alignment and getting things moving forward, as opposed to all of that tired thing from before, which is, and I've seen this frequently, again, from the consulting side, the money's changing hands, the results are not coming in, everybody's discontent. It ruins it for the next agency that comes in to do actual good work, or the next vendor or whatever, when somebody doesn't do good work along the way. So I'm so glad to hear. I'm just going to recap for a second some of these employee pieces that you talked about. So we got into talking about how to help leaders understand this branding piece, and you really focused on, again, does the employee understand what you do, why you do it? Are they engaged? Do they trust? And is the company investing in them? I really appreciate that you've brought all that thorough thinking along with the statistics to this piece. And again, we could probably just talk on and on, but I'm going to sort of round out with the main question that we sort of taper off these interviews with every time. And it's a simple one. It goes like this. What inspires you?
So this actually goes back to exactly what we're really talking about today. And I think a lot of it has to do, even with the work that you do with groups of people, it comes back to this dynamic that happens when people come together. There's an old Carl Jung quote that says, when two people come together and the environment is right, a transformation will occur and those people will be changed forever. It's that feeling that happens when a group of people come together with a challenge, that we've outlined that challenge really, really well, and we've solved that challenge, and we've come up with a really, really great idea. The greatest feeling in the world is being in your car with two really incredible ideas that you're proud of, that answer the brief, but also just inspire and engage you to keep going and do what you do. To me, that's the transformational thing that happens when you're in a group of people that all believe in what you believe in. That pushing really, really hard to be that creator, the creator archetype, right? And the creator archetype only happens when everybody kind of works together and everybody feels valued and everybody can participate. The thought that every day we can kind of solve these problems and go through these transformational moments where we just kind of go, holy crap. Do you see where we started and where we got to?
Thank you so much for going way beyond just information in your answer. I mean, your true passion is leaking through what you're saying, and it's so good. I just need to sort of see if you can take out of your brain archives for this one moment. Is there a moment, you said sitting in the car, is there a moment when you see the creative in action? Is it the moment when you see the creative make a transformation? Is it a moment when you see that sentence roll off the tongue of somebody's employee that they never knew was going to happen? Like, take me to a specific moment when this occurred for you.
I'll tell you a really funny story, and it was very early on in our business. We had a client who was a lawyer who didn't want to be a lawyer anymore. And he wanted to open up a coffee business, which seemed kind of outrageous. But I mean, that was really, really a new thing. And this was 15 years ago, kind of before the advent of all of these different micro roasting companies in town or around the world. And he came to us and talked about coffee. And he talked about coffee like it was a religious experience, right? And he's a religious guy. And he was very, very emotional and passionate about coffee. And he roasted green coffee in a popcorn popper and ground it up for us.
Wow.
And made us a cup of coffee and said, like, this is what I'm talking about, right? And that whole emotional moment where he was really talking about it as like, this is like raising the awareness or the understanding of something to a level beyond everybody else's expectations around coffee. And he gave us his job of naming his company. And the names that he was kicking around that he gave us was like River City Coffee. And I'm like, come on, like seriously, you're really talking about this in a whole different world, right? Anyway, the name that we came up with, and actually it was my business partner at the time, just came up and he just said, transcend.
Wow.
Like, it's a religious word. It's a connection word. It's about raising up. It's about raising coffee to a new level. And it's this emotional moment that we had where we thought like, oh my God, this fits him and fits that organization based on the passion and the relationship that this guy had with coffee, and how he's basically set the city on fire with their understanding of like how coffee even works. But he lived it. He lives and walks the walk and talks the talk about coffee. And we believe in him. We believed in what he was trying to do. But coming up with a name like that and just feeling like I can't wait to get him back here to show him the name and a visual identity, and just know that we're setting him off on the right track with a name and a brand that really talks about taking people's expectations of coffee to a level they've never even experienced.
Never even experienced. I've been in a Transcend coffee shop. That was the one that I had in my mind. I was so glad it was you, then connecting up that it was you that did that. That's a profitable business, right? You can see again the value of when, like you said, folks are walking side by side. There's an intersection. This is so far beyond detail and all the way up into philosophy and belief and those types of things. You can hear you're bringing that to work every day. If people need to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah. So our website is themetagency.com. My email address is morrissey@themetagency.com. You can find that on our website as well. And we have an office number here, which is strange. People still use the phone, 780-628-2494, and we're in Edmonton.
And we'll make sure all that information gets in the show notes. And if you need to track down anything from this interview, get in touch with me or get in touch directly with James. James, thank you so much for bringing your full set of passion and skills to this interview. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Now, wasn't that just the kind of episode that you know you're going to have to listen to twice? I mean, James went over so many valuable concepts. The 4 factors that you need for engagement. The idea of knowing that you are one of, multiple brand archetypes. And when you define that, not only will it improve your organization, but it will help you to actually choose the right customers and get those things aligned. And then when you throw on a dash of passion like he has, it is a great set of ingredients, a great recipe to really make transformation occur. And for anybody who wants to get a copy of the Brand Archetypes document, just get in touch with James by going to the show notes. You'll pull out his contact information there, and I'm sure he'll be back in touch with you right away. And also, during the interview, we mentioned a few other episodes on the Meeting Leadership podcast. The first one was called How Leaders Can Build a Remarkable Brand, and that is with Louisa Campos. That was episode 142 on the show, and if you'd like to listen to that one, just go to meetingleadershipinc.com/142. And then, if you'd like to find out how Disney knocks it out of the park when it comes to, really being a strong organization, then check out episode 132 on the Meeting Leadership podcast. It's called How Disney Develops Outstanding Leaders, and that's with Dan Cockrell. And you can get that episode by going to meetingleadershipinc.com/132. And if you enjoyed how James inspired us at the end of that interview, you're also going to enjoy these episodes on the Meeting Leadership podcast. Now, episode 127, it's called Beyond Your Pay, Why Meeting Leaders Should Have an Inspiration Registry. And you can get that episode by going to meetingleadershipinc.com/127. And of course, everyone who comes on the show leaves a great, inspiring story. And one of those great ones came from David Papp. You can get that in episode 99 by going to meetingleadershipinc.com/99. And I also want to let you know that this episode of the Meeting Leadership podcast is brought to you by the Meeting Leadership Academy. Now there you're going to find some wonderful online training options and live training options for you and your team to really get the ability to improve your leadership skills and learn how to run highly effective meetings. And you can learn all about that by going to meetingleadershipinc.com/academy. And as always, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Meeting Leadership Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Meeting Leadership Podcast. Be sure to subscribe for more strategies to help you become an outstanding leader. And don't forget to rate and review so we can bring you even more great content. We'll see you next time, right here on the Meeting Leadership Podcast.
I'm on top of the world, now I'm living, and the good just gets better, keeps it giving.